Hello and welcome back to another exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. It's good to be here with you guys this evening. Tonight we have got Gothi Rob Stamm. Perhaps I should say Dean Gothi Rob Stamm. For those of you that may not know, Rob is in charge of our Asatru Academy homeschool program, and we'll ask him some things about that this evening as well. It's a good opportunity. Okay, so top of the show, like, share, and subscribe if you like these, or if you want other people to like these or get a chance to see them. All those little stuff on the little tedious, clicking the likes, clicking the shares, and subscribing. It helps the algorithms. It gets this in front of more eyes. If you think this is something that people ought to see, please help us in that way and we can get the message out. I appreciate it. That being said, we're broadcasting live tonight on Rumble, on Odyssey, on Twitter, on Entropy, on YouTube, and on VK. So hello to all our audiences on those different platforms. Feel free to use those and get involved. Entropy and Rumble, we can take tips and we can take super chats, get any questions to the front of the line, and any tips that you might want to give us goes towards a good cause. We got a lot of great things the AFA is trying to do, and we certainly appreciate y'all's generosity. Think of any other top of the hour stuff. Don't know that we've got any this week that's different from last week, but I do know coming up very soon, coming up this month, we're going to have Freyfaxy at Baldershof. That's Baldershof's big event of each year. It's going to be great this year. We've got a lot of people signing up for that so far. I'm going to be out there. Would love to get a chance to meet those of you I haven't met and spend time with friends that maybe I haven't seen in a while, and even some of you that I have seen recently. So we'd love to see you out there if you guys can make it. That's in Murdoch, Minnesota. Again, you don't have to be a member to attend, but you do need to check with one of our folk builders and get all that squared away before you show up. And if you're a member, we would, they're your Hoffs if you're a member, and we would love to see you there. Also this month, we are having a Texas, I believe it's a Texas Harvest Fest. Trying to read it. It's a little bit, the graphics show up a little bit small on my screen, but you want to reach out to folk builder Justin Day. He's been putting a lot of work in making that a really nice thing. Something going on in a part of the country that it's not often served by some of our bigger national events. So it's a really good opportunity for folks in the area to get together, and we would love to have you guys come out for that if you're able. Again, you want to reach out to Justin Day, jday@runestone.org if you want to be involved with that. And so I figure the best bet will be to get to this up front, and then we can answer any questions on it once we're done talking about Hermann. But can you tell people a little bit about, if they've never heard about it before, about our Asatru Academy, and talk a little bit about what we learned or our experiences from year one of that?
Sure. Basically, it's a homeschooling program. So our parents are still in charge of instruction and ultimately in charge of what they present to their children. But we do provide curriculum to parents, and we also provide a support network. And we help them with like their state requirements, any forms or paperwork they need to file with their school district or the government. Some states require a letter of intent, some don't, and we help parents with all the regulations and requirements for it. And then we have an online learning platform where we present material to the parents, and then they can present it to their children. We offer, as far as academics go, we go with a Waldorf curriculum because it is developmentally based, and we find that that is the best for children. It's not based off of some arbitrary standard that's been decided. It's based on how children's brains develop. And Waldorf also incorporates a lot of outside time, and we think that's important for overall health and well-being of children. And then on top of that, we offer religious instruction and activities. And then some of our leadership have recorded videos doing storytelling, lore telling, things of that nature that we also offer. And we also offer a parent support group on our meeting platform, so the parents can collaborate and work together and also be in touch with us at all times. Basically, anything you could ever think of and want for homeschooling, we offer it. Any problems that you might have, we hold your hand through it. So it is really the easiest way in the world to homeschool. And then on top of that, we've got our clergy putting together excellent religious instruction that's tailored to the age, so it's age appropriate. We have Githia McNailen, Sheila McNailen, who was a public school teacher for years and years. She's on staff and she helps a lot with that. We also have my assistant dean, Rachel Johnson, who is a Waldorf expert. She knows everything there is to ever know about Waldorf. So she's a fantastic resource as well. And she homeschools all her children. So she has a lot of experience with navigating sort of state regulations and how best to accomplish that with small children. Because admittedly, my experience was with older children and adults. So both Githia McNailen and Assistant Dean Johnson have been absolutely vital to our success and have worked really hard with me to create this wonderful program that we have. And last year we had we had some lessons that we learned. We want to do more collaboration, more video meetups with all the parents and children to work together, and really more integrated into the folks and the kindreds and the Hoffs, so that it really feels like it's not just an Asatru school, it's an AFA school. It's we want to really tie that into the community, and that's what we're working hard on for this next year, is to really integrate that more into the AFA community as a whole.
And how many kids did we have graduate kindergarten this last year?
Oh, I want to say, if I remember correctly, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this. Nick actually volunteers for the school as well. I believe we had it was 11, I believe. And
that is fantastic for year one.
Absolutely. And this upcoming year, I believe we have one more now. So I believe the total now is 31 for this upcoming school year.
So, tell folks. So last year we just had a kindergarten curriculum, and
Right.
we are absolutely committed to following that kindergarten class up to graduating in 2036, I think. To making sure there's material for them as they get to each of these grades. But you guys have gone above and beyond. Tell folks about the grades that we're able to enroll for this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. This fall we'll be enrolling K through third. We wanted to make sure we got at least through third. We have and are working on material up to fifth and sixth, but we didn't quite get that ready for this fall. We want to make sure that we absolutely have tons of content and everything is good to go and great before we actually offer it to kids. We don't want to have a substandard program for a grade level. So we went ahead and we concentrated all our efforts on getting K through 3, and we have got a excellent K through 3 program ready to go, ready for our kids this fall.
That's an amazing amount of progress in just a year's time. I'm very, very excited about that. What do people need to know if they have children eligible to be in kindergarten through third as far as enrollment and how all of that works?
To enroll, you go to our website, and there's a form there to enroll. You have to be a member of the AFA, although I'm very happy to report we have got members in the AFA because of the academy. They've come and joined the AFA because they want their kids in our academy. That's something that we take a lot of pride in, that we are attracting members to the church, and then the whole family grows together. Um, so you just go to the website, you fill out the form, and right away, Sarah Alt will contact you and get you information, talk to you, see if you have any questions. And then from there, we can enroll you, depending on obviously your child's age and which grade is appropriate. And at that point, depending on your state and the requirements for that, we'll reach out to you to get you started with how to get logged into our online learning platform, how to, uh, if you need a letter of intent, if you need any state reporting requirements. A few states require like quarterly reports. They just want to see progress that you're doing something. We'll tell you how to do that. We'll give you examples on how to do that. We've got it all.
So I'm going to hit this question now because it's timely and it's in the chat over there. But we have a Nordic hockey fan asking, what if people live somewhere where homeschooling is illegal? For example, in some parts of Europe where there are AFA members like Sweden. If I remember correctly, homeschooling is illegal. I want to assure you guys that, well, a couple of things. We'll always be honest with you, and we may not always have the answers that you like, but we'll always give you the honest answers. I wish that we could go fix Europe and make them all act right, but unfortunately, that's a little bit beyond our scope. What I don't think is any way illegal is supplementing what they're already doing with some of our materials if you'd like to, or if you find, in part or in whole, any of the things that we're doing valuable to your children over there. One thing we did learn is there are some provinces in Canada that do support homeschooling, and we're trying to figure out the best way to be compliant with those. One of the things that I just want to make a big point of, that as the Altair Gothi, I'm super proud of, but also as a father with a daughter that's going to be taking this homeschooling in, just a couple of years now. One of the scariest things, at least to me, comprehending it is, wanting to make sure it's all legit with whatever state I'm in, wanting to make sure that, I don't miss something or don't not know how to do something, especially if my state's got, rules that may sound scary up front. What I love so much about the Asatru Academy is, especially with Rachel's help in there, we're learning how to navigate each of these different state governmental systems with each student that we have enrolled in them. And we're learning as the student grows. We have a team of people to hold your hand through that process and help have your back and make sure that everything is done the way it needs to be and that everything is compliant by your state. And, you have a partner there, so you're not just stuck worrying by yourself. And this is so accessible. I encourage everyone out there, if you're able to do this, if you are able to get your children in an environment where you can teach them the things that you believe that are valuable to you and that are going to be healthy for those children, please do that. If it's with us, great. If it's not, that's fine too. But if you're able to, this is a really, really great thing that you can do for your kids. And we'd love to be a part of that if you want to be part of it. With that, and I also might as well say this right now. Hello to our New Zealanders that are in the chat. That's fantastic. I love that you guys are listening over there. You have a beautiful country. I went there a number of years ago and drove all over the Southern Island. And, I was just in Auckland to get, for a couple of days either side, flying in and flying out. But it was beautiful, amazing place. And I love having you guys here in the audience. If no one has ever heard his name before, first, that's shameful, but we got people out there who haven't. If no one's ever heard of him, can you please introduce our audience to Hermann/Arminius and tell them what they need to know?
Sure. First thing though, Gothi Mayo no balls challenged me, so I have to do it. It's not bad, I promise. The Oralinda book is absolutely fake. It couldn't get any faker. Also, something that's kind of a pet peeve between some of us when we were talking about it is, and it's been going on for years and years and years, and it is part of the conversation tonight. Um, the word Germanic, it does not just apply to continental Germans. It applies to all of us. It's an ethnonym for all the people. Norwegians, Swedes, Swiss, Icelanders, Germans. It's English. It's an ethnic term for all of us that speak a Germanic language. So there, rant over, and we'll begin with Hermann. Hermann, as Altair Gothi said, he's also known by Arminius, and actually, we don't know that Hermann was his Germanic name. That is working backwards to reconstruct what Arminius would have been in Germanic. But he was born in 18 or 17 BC. We're not sure exactly. And he was born a prince of the Cherusci tribe, which was a Germanic tribe who was pro-Roman. His father was a chief who was pro-Roman. And as such, he and his brother both joined the Roman military at a young age. Hermann himself, he served with distinction in the Great Illyrian Revolt in the Roman legions, and he was in the rank of equus, which is, we might think of that as like a knight. They were mounted. That meant that they could afford a mount and weapons. So in the Roman world, that was kind of like a knightly rank, and he was a Roman citizen, as was his brother. And that's how he found himself back in Germania. He was posted to kind of help keep the peace up there with under General Varus, and that's what kind of set things in motion. Hermann got back up there, and instead of just towing the line and being a dutiful Roman officer, he started to talk to his Germanic brethren and start getting the tribes to work together and to unite. Now, it's got to be said that would be against what his family had done. His family had been pro-Roman, and his tribe had been split basically, but there was a strong Roman faction within his tribe. But he started to get the tribes to work together and to challenge Rome for supremacy in Germania. So in 9 AD, the legions were marching to their winter quarters, and Hermann convinced them that there was a revolt in the north of Germany by some of the tribes. And this was fake. This was a lie. So he convinced Varus to turn the legions to march, to go put down the revolt, and march them right into a trap in the Teutoburg forest, where Hermann led the tribes against Rome. And over a 3-day battle, they destroyed 3 whole legions, which is 18,000 troops, 3 cavalry cohorts, 6 cohorts of auxiliaries. A grand total, we think about 20,000 Roman soldiers died in Teutoburg. And essentially what that did was that drove Rome out of Germania. There was some fighting for the next few years, but Rome never, they pulled back and stayed on the west side of the Rhine. They never went back into Germania like that. So Hermann, it cannot be overstated how important his role was. He changed the course of history. If you're familiar with Europe prior to Rome, the Gauls spoke a Gallic language, Celtic, and they no longer do. The French speak a Latin-based language. The Spanish, they no longer speak a Celtic-based language. They speak a Latin-based language. When Rome goes into it, completely changes the culture, completely changes the language. It changes history. So Hermann was able to stop that for Germania, and who knows where Rome would have gone. They may have gone into Scandinavia. They were already in England. There's nothing to say they wouldn't have gone further. So really, entire Germanic world owes their culture to that one German prince that said, no, had enough. And it also can't be overstated. He was a Roman citizen of knightly rank, and he was an officer in the legions. And Rome offered heated baths and marble floors and food from all over the known world and all, silk from China, untold luxuries. And he had that as a royal from a Germanic tribe and as in the noble class in Rome. He enjoyed all those luxuries, and he gave that up to fight for his folk and to keep his folk the folk. So that in of itself speaks so much to his character. Um, as I said, after Teutoburg, there was some sporadic fighting. For instance, his brother, I had it written down here, but his brother did come up to Germania and fight with Germanicus, who was a Roman general sent to put down Hermann. So Hermann fought against his own brother in the continuing wars that occurred during that time. And in fact, Hermann lost his wife. His wife, Thysnelda, was kidnapped. She was pregnant at the time, and he never saw her again. And he was so upset and distraught. He never married again. But eventually, they were successful, and Rome never ventured across the Rhine again, as I said. Unfortunately, in 21 AD, Hermann was assassinated by his own nobles, who were concerned that he was gaining too much power. And there were some that were pro-Roman, but for the most part, we believe that he was assassinated by his nobles because they were worried he was gaining too much power. He had put down another rival Germanic king of the Marcomanni, and had absorbed that king's power as well. So out of jealousy and not wanting to see him rise and continue to consolidate Germanic power, he was unfortunately assassinated. But the good thing is Rome still did not come back. As a historic figure, Germany did honor in the past, especially during the times of German unification. They viewed Hermann as that consolidating and unifying personage in their history. So he was very much romanticized during the times of German unification. And also, historians have tied Hermann to the Sigurd saga, actually. Some historians believe that Sigurd is based off of Hermann, interestingly.
So there you have it. I see in the chat they mentioned that there's a very famous statue in New Ulm, Minnesota, that commemorates Hermann, and there's also a statue in Germany in the Teutoburger Wald that a similar statue that the New Ulm statue is based on. So he is certainly a celebrated figure in history. At least he was when it was okay to celebrate our heroes historically. A couple of really, really important things about his life that stand out to me that I think are particularly meaningful. Our people have always had this very dangerous problem of balkanizing into ever smaller and increasingly insignificant units of folks and having trouble getting along and working together. And it was amazing that, naked, technologically relatively primitive peoples were able to, with just that spark of unification, defeat the strongest army the world had ever seen in such a spectacular way. And I think it's such a profound lesson that when we put aside pettiness and work together, we are able to accomplish truly miraculous things. So much so that that was not only culturally significant to the Germanics, and it didn't just militarily keep Rome from expanding, it became a cultural terror to Rome. It was something that, the greatest art, one of the greatest and most powerful rulers in the history of the world, the first Caesar, the first emperor of Rome, Augustus, would, he's driven half crazy, and he would walk the halls lamenting, Varus, give me back my legions, because this defeat was so devastating. When we stand together, we can do truly, truly amazing things. And I mean, that same thing comes in at the end of his life. They were at the cusp of some really, really great things, but pettiness and jealousy took over, and "you're not the boss of me" took over, and ended up killing their greatest hero. And who knows what amazing things they could have done if they had united and stayed united.
Cautionary tale.
Well, yeah, it is. It's a cautionary tale, and it's just as relevant, if not more so, today than it's ever been. And the other thing that I wanted to point out that's very relevant to why he is one of our religious figures that we revere is there was a great amount of piety. The celebrations after the victory included religious observance. There was bloat to our gods. There was sacrifice made to Nerthus and to Odin. There were sacrifices hung in the trees. There were sacrifices deposited in the bogs. The victory was truly seen in a religious light and as a religious bounty from our gods. And that very important recognition of that was really significant. And I think it's one of the reasons that Hermann's not just someone who is militarily important as a historical figure or who is culturally important, but he's very religiously important in that aspect. Looks like Mary in Las Vegas is extremely excited, as she should be, about Hermann, one of our most spectacular, most celebrated heroes. Let's get to some of our questions. Trent asks, Gothi Stamm, is there a particular god or goddess that you are especially devoted to?
Well, as a polytheist and as a priest, I'm devoted to all of them. However, I am very partial to two in particular. Being a priest at Thor's Hof, Lord Thor, absolutely. And also Ostara. I'm actually writing a book on Ostara. It's been in the process for a few years. I promise I will finish eventually. But yeah, we hold Ostara in the south at Thor's Hof, and that's kind of what really started that. But yes, Thor and Ostara.
All right. Jason Gallagher wants to know, Gothi Stamm, how many god poles have you carved for our gods?
I have carved one, one at Baldershof. Great time. I love being up there. I'd love to do more. I think I'm not the most talented wood carver, but I do okay.
All right. Gothi Bodhi Mayo. Gothi Stamm, why is Meister von List so important to us in Asatru?
Well, Meister von List is part of that German reawakening in the 19th century. I think we owe a lot of our own reawakening later on to those folks in the 19th century that kind of lit the spark that continued on down the ages. And also, I believe that Meister von List was divinely inspired and received the Armor and Rune set. So I do believe that Meister von List is important. study and to understand to some degree, at least for most folks. But yeah, I think he's definitely important to Asatru because he was part of that Germanic reawakening in the late 19th century, and that kind of lit the spark that continues. Um, Even today in Germany, the Armen runes are the most popular rune set.
Yeah, that's one of those things. And first, you don't need to couch that in your personal belief. Meister von List was absolutely blessed by Odin with runic vision and runic insight, and with the insight into the Armen runes. Not only is it, was it the popular runes when people were first rediscovering runes, it's arguable that, maybe we wouldn't have the runic practice, the runic cult that we have today, if it wasn't for that runic reawakening that Meister von List heralded. It is, and here in about a month, we'll come back and we'll talk about him specifically and have a specific episode on him. But it's very easy to look back at someone who has less resources and an earlier stage of knowledge than we have, and to see all the things that are different, or all the things that could have been improved or were incomplete or were imperfect. But it's often slips our mind that the pioneers in these fields worked with so much less resources than we have now, and their zeal, their reawakening of our folk, and their reestablishing our connection with our gods went so far to pave the way for all of the things we take for granted today and have it at our fingertips. If it wasn't for people who pioneered that, like Meister von List, who knows what kind of information we would have or not have today. It sparked the reawakening of rediscovery of these things that had at that time certainly been lost to history largely. It was truly, truly a remarkable thing. And, it wasn't just a scholarly pursuit, which would have been great and really valuable. But not only was it scholarly, it was pious, it was religious. It was an absolute reawakening of his connection with our ancestral gods, and it's a connection that we're still building upon today. Sarah asks, do you agree that Prince Hermann would have encouraged the Germanic tribes to enroll their children in the Asatru Academy? What say you, Rob?
100%. I think Herman would love it. Herman wants you to sign up.
So here's the thing. Yes, it's funny, and absolutely, but in a really serious way, absolutely he would. We hope he would. Everything that we do is never done flip. It's done aware that our gods are watching us, aware that our heroes and our ancestors are looking on, and it's absolutely at the forefront of our mind that we want them to be proud of the things that we're doing. If we didn't believe that our heroes would want their descendants and our descendants to be in this Asatru Academy, then it's not something we'd be doing. So no, absolutely, we believe that Herman would want that. And just anecdotally, yeah, of course he would. In a time period where the education of children, especially noble children, was being taken over by the Roman state, and they're being taught Roman customs and Roman language and Roman ways, and deliberately disabused of their local customs and traditions, he would absolutely want the children of his tribes to learn where they come from, to get passed on the culture and the values of their parents, of their grandparents, of their ancestors. Next question. Hi, Matt and Rob. Can you tell us where Freyr's Harvest Feast will be held this year? Absolutely. Freyr's Harvest Feast will be held in Montana. Nick, do you have a better location in Montana? Montana's a big state. Well, hold on one second because I got resources. Let me check something. Looks like smack dab in the middle of Montana. So yeah, in the central Montana, and that is going on at the end of next month. Nick's got the dates up there, but for those of you listening on Spotify or something where you can't see the screen, it'll be September 22nd through the 24th. Tickets on sale at runestone.org, and the folk builder hosting that is Tyler Heinlein, THEINLEIN at runestone.org, and he'd be happy to give you more information on that and get you all set up if it's something you'd like to attend. What is Freyr's Harvest Feast? It is a autumn celebration in honor of Lord Frey, in honor of the harvest, and it's a good opportunity for folks within driving distance or flying distance, if you're so inclined, of Montana to go up, get together with local folk up there, and to celebrate the harvest, our folk, Lord Frey, our gods in general, and it's a good time to get together. I would really like to make it there this year, and I'm going to try to do that. I missed out on the Freyr's Harvest Feast last year, and I don't want to repeat that mistake. I would like to be able to. Well, I had other stuff I was having to do, but I would really like to make it up there this year. Beautiful, beautiful country, and it's a good time with great people. Next question is, was Arminius an Asatru? Absolutely, Arminius was Asatru. I saw law speaker Alan Turnage's response over in the chat, and that's true. The name Asatru wouldn't have, wasn't developed at that point because it wouldn't have made any sense. Hermann, as a Cherusci, would have worshipped the gods of his tribe. And that's just how that was. There was no question. There was no religious smorgasbord, certainly amongst the Germanic tribes. When you got into Rome, it was a little bit different. There was a lot more options of your faith. The question with folks like Hermann was, well, I suppose as a Roman equitas, he could have adopted a Roman cult, but he was absolutely Asatru. As I mentioned, after the battle, they made sacrifices to Odin and to Nerthus and to others of our gods on the battlefield and in celebration. The question back then wasn't so much what your religious choice was. It was how pious you were with your religion. But religion and culture weren't, they were inseparable at the time. Next question. Hi, Gothi Stamm. I'm loving this discussion, especially since I named my son Armin. I had a slightly off-topic question, though. Where is Freyr's Harvest Feast? And is it truly on an AFA homestead? It is absolutely, it's Central Montana, like I said, and it is absolutely on the homestead of an AFA member in that area that he is inviting us all to come out and celebrate on. So yeah, he's got a great thing going there. He's doing a really nice job with he and his family. We'd love to go out there and be supportive of that and see his homestead and celebrate that as well. So one more good reason to come out to Freyr's Harvest Feast. Next question is, can you go into a little more depth on the curriculum and how it works? day-to-day itinerary, things like that. Are there Zoom class meetings with fellow students? Does the AFA provide books/material?
So what we provide is we provide all the curriculum for, say, for example, second grade Waldorf curriculum. We provide all of it and the book, the Waldorf book, digitally. And then it's all available on our online learning platform. I don't have a day-to-day lesson plan handy, but there is day-to-day lesson plans in the curriculum. And there's also things that we coach you on. For example, we don't really think of it, but when we go grocery shopping and we bring our children, that's an opportunity to learn. And the states where you do have to keep track of instruction time, you can use that, for example, adding up prices or adding up apples, or calculating tax, things like we don't even really think about that we just do naturally that can be counted as instruction time. So we coach you on that. As far as books, we have a reading list that we provide, and some of those are available digitally. But the Waldorf curriculum book itself, we do provide, and we provide the curriculum, and that includes worksheets, etc. As far as Zoom classes, we don't use Zoom. We use a different platform for video. We use Teams. But yes, that is one thing that we got feedback on, is that the parents wanted more of that, so we are going to be implementing more of that this upcoming year.
All right. Following along that line, Gothi Rob, is there anything that parents should be doing to prepare their children to start at the academy before their kindergarten age?
Well, the good thing, like I said about Waldorf, is it is developmentally designed. So the curriculum and what they learn in, for instance, K1, kindergarten 1, is specifically designed for that child's age so that they can to learn it and comprehend it correctly. As far as prior to kindergarten, things that you want to do, things that I do with my 3-year-old are, say, counting, practicing counting blocks or learning their colors. You can start, if you want, toward getting closer toward kindergarten age, learning ABCs. But again, that's pretty advanced. But we do have kids that come in prepared with that. Being one thing that's big is identifying things that are alive and things that are material. That's part of kindergarten, and that's something you can prime your children with pretty early. So basic preschool type stuff. We've been wanting to do a preschool type program for a while. It's just getting the stuff together, and we've been really focused on making sure that our current students have their next grade. We do anticipate having a preschool program at some point, but I'm not sure exactly when. But yeah, basic stuff like counting, colors, animal identification, stuff like that.
All right. Rob, do we know anything about Prince Hermann's offspring, if he had any?
We do know his wife Nelda was pregnant when she was captured by Rome. He never saw his son. For what we know, his son grew up in Rome as a Roman, essentially. Let's see, I have the name here, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, Thamelicus. I did a little bit of Latin, but not enough to get some of these names right. But his son did grow up in Rome as a Roman.
All right. So you mentioned the figures for Roman losses. Next question here is, Rob, if the Romans lost 20,000 troops in the Black Forest, How many did Hermann lose?
I don't have the figures for how many Herman lost. Um, it was like I said, it was several tribes allied together, which would have made accounting that much more difficult. And we didn't really have a whole lot of written records at that time. There are some basic runic writings from the Volkswanderung, which is migration era, but they're very basic. We could find somebody's name on a comb, or the name of a god on a figurine, or something very basic. We have some of the earliest runic writings from the Volkswanderung, but we didn't have vast written records at the time. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to find figures for how many we lost in that.
So Wikipedia says unknown but minor. Again, Rome's accounting system for these kind of things is very, very advanced. They had good numbers on unit strength, and they kept those kind of records. So it's a lot easier to figure out. A confederation of barbarian tribes, much less so as far as written records of, how many people mustered and what kind of casualties, and their record keeping system just wasn't something that they excelled at, certainly not to the degree that Rome did. It's amazing that 2,000 years later, we can have relatively accurate information from any people during that period. And that's a testament to Rome's administration and ability to keep track of those kind of things. Are any of you familiar with Terry Jones' book, Barbarians? I am not. Are you, Rob?
No, I'm not either.
I'm familiar a little bit with the Netflix series. Only saw season 1. Yeah, that's why I didn't watch season 2. Those of you who are listening to this on Spotify, miss Rob making a really cool face.
I watched 10 minutes of season 2 and the fur bikinis that Isnelda was wearing. I'm like, no, I can't do this. Not as an historian. I can't watch this.
All right. So our next question is Freyfaxi from a Wiccan holiday. No, but it certainly overlaps with one, and that's because our celebrations are based on common Aryan festivals around certain times of the year. So yeah, it certainly overlaps with and coincides with. Isn't that the loaf mass? Isn't that the case, Rob?
I believe so. The Thaids use loaf moth as well.
But yeah, it's important to note that those that calendar of celebrations is common to Aryan peoples generally, especially in that part of Europe, and so there is a lot of overlap. Freyfaxi very specifically is, at least as far as the name goes, is referenced to an Icelandic saga about a what you want to call it, a farmer and his horse who was specifically dedicated to Frey, and a very interesting story that goes along with that. But that's where that name ends up coming from. Rob, the Asatru Academy is truly a legacy project, and as such, what are your pie in the sky goals for it?
Pie in the sky goals. Eventually I'd like to see a brick and mortar school at Sigerheim. Probably run along the same kind of guidelines. I would like to see some eventually in this, pie in the sky. I would like to see also a skilled trades program offered in the high school ages. Where I went to high school, they had this option for students where they could go to this trade program and learn a trade while they were still in high school and getting high school credit. And I thought that was a fantastic program. I'd like to see something like that. Now, again, that's going to kind of require more of a brick and mortar type situation. But if we could work with some kind of trade school or whatever while they're in our program, and they could still get elective credit for it, I think that'd be awesome. Um, maybe my great great grandchildren, there will be an Asatru University. That would be great. If we're talking really deep into the future. But I mean,
That's what was asked. Your pie in the sky, big goals for it.
realistic goals, I'd like to see every member's child in the Asatru Academy. I think that's a realistic goal that I can achieve in my lifetime.
And with getting 3 grades worth of curriculum figured out in this last school year, you're well on your way to making that happen. So our next question, does the Asatru Academy allow international enrollments? We absolutely will be homeschooling, just starting kindergarten homeschool now. And for what it's worth, this is one of our New Zealanders asking the question, I believe.
I'm not familiar with the New Zealand laws, but it sounds like that New Zealand allows homeschool. So as long as your country, you're legally able to homeschool, we will look into the requirements and the regulations and whatnot. And as long as your country legally allows it, absolutely. Like I said, our academic curriculum that we use, Waldorf, is used internationally. It's very well known. It's not something that is brand new or seat of the pants. I mean, it's very well respected and known. So it's a quality program. As long as it's legal in your country, yeah, I'll have our folks look into New Zealand. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to throw that out there. It's something we're absolutely committed to doing. We would love to do it in every place that it's legal. One of the things, in order for us to go down that rabbit hole, we need someone who's interested, who wants to enroll their kid. When we have that in a particular country, then yeah, we'll bend over backwards to see what we can do to make it work, because we're very committed to making it work. So if it's at all possible within our means and capabilities and, without great ethical compromise, we're willing to do what we need to do to try to make it compliant for, any jurisdiction that accepts homeschooling. So please, we would love to have your children involved. Next question from Cliff. Gothi Rob, and also here, Gothi Matt. Is there a virtue that you think Hermann embodies above others? What do you think, Rob?
Well, it's hard to pick one because Hermann is such a fine example of a hero of our folk. Courage. And like I said, he pretty much, as a hero and a noble person that we look up to. I mean, he really embodies most of them, or all of them. But courage, to me, is probably his biggest. As I said, he gave up a real life of luxury to go back and fight for his people, and that takes courage. It does take courage to say, you know what, I don't want those heated baths and those silk robes. I'm going to go throw on some wool pants and live in the cold. Germany's cold. Rome is warm. I know that seems silly, but I'm going to give up all these fine things and go and fight for my people. That takes courage. It takes courage to try to go to these different tribes that have never been united, and some of them even fight against each other and say, hey, let's stop doing this. Let's get it together and be one and work as one, and we can accomplish great things. It takes a lot of courage to even think you can try that. And then it takes courage to fight 20,000 trained professional soldiers. Roman soldiers were professional soldiers. That was something that just was unheard of in the ancient world. They were paid full-time soldiers. They devoted their entire life to soldiering. They were good fighters. You can say a lot about Rome, but their army was awesome. They were good fighters. So that takes a lot of courage to go up against that machine. So courage.
I wish I had the quote in front of me right now, but Tacitus, and I think in Annals, eulogized Hermann in a really special way. And if you get on a roll answering one of these questions, I might look it up. But basically, from a Roman living, within a generation of this time, he celebrated the accomplishments of Hermann against Rome when Rome was at its height. And that's one of the things that was really important. Yeah, I'm going to go with courage as well. Rob stole my answer, but that's what I get for letting him go first. But courage on so many fronts. He, from within the Roman army, arranged this and pulled off the deception while he was still in enemy hands. Anybody could have called the bluff, and it would have been over for him right then. With all of these different tribes that were so self-interested, so many people that did have a tendency towards disloyalty, he could have been ratted out at any time. And he still marched there with the legions for part of the march. He still was amongst the enemy while this was getting put together. And anybody blowing the whistle, and it would have been the end for him. If that was taken seriously. And then to stand with, a ragged, poorly armed, poorly equipped, not professional soldier fighting force against the most overwhelming force in the world, that's terrifying. Any of Rome's enemies at the time or 500 years either side of it could testify how terrifying that was. And having the courage to do that with an uncertain outcome, that took a lot. Having the courage to take a stand and be involved in the tribal politics of that day when there was so much jealousy and there was so much backstabbing. Being willing to stand up and be that guy that was going to, step up and take charge. Everybody throws their hands up and shrugs their shoulders and like, well, who's it going to be? Who's to say? He decided it was him. He was the one to say. And because he did, for that brief moment, our people had glory that they never conceived of before. So no, his courage, I think, is the standout virtue. Our next question is, didn't he, Hermann's son, become a gladiator? I heard something like that somewhere.
That I'm not sure of. The only thing I could find was that he lived out his life in Rome.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't think that's something that's known, but I think that's some popular fan fiction. And which maybe we don't know that he didn't.
Romans really respected rank, though, and someone coming from a royal caste or a noble caste, I don't think they'd make him a gladiator. But
well, it's odd that his name is completely lost to history because for the exact reason you're mentioning, they would want to use him as political leverage in dealings with the tribes. It would be, or in leading forces of, federati or things. It would be really strange for them to put him in a gladiatorial spot unless it was just as a humiliation because they were so spicy about getting trounced in the woods. But maybe we don't know. Could you give us a little insight on how the Germanic tribes' understanding of the gods compared to our modern understanding, i.e., names, traits, and any known stories? I mean, names, you could dial things back. They wouldn't be the Scandinavian names of our gods, they'd be the Germanic names. I think their worldview would have been much, much smaller. I don't think they would have seen the unity of our gods back to the period of Aryan migrations. I don't think they would have that sense of history. I think that they would view their gods much more intimately as the gods of their tribe and a couple surrounding tribes. But I think their idea of the size of the world and the connectivity of our Aryan spirituality was much more limited than ours. I think it's fascinating because we don't know what stories they had back then, or certainly not very many of them. So much of our lore comes to us through, the early medieval period in Scandinavia that it's hard to tell. I mean, it's even attested at the time that these things come from, long-standing oral tradition. But how far back each of those stories went, I don't know. I think that's kind of fascinating. Rob, what do you have to add on that?
It's hard, like you said, it's hard to say. We can look at a little bit of archaeology and linguistics. At that time, they were probably speaking still common Germanic everywhere in the Germanic world. So we can reconstruct the names of the gods and goddesses into common Germanic, but that's just a reconstruction. We're not 100% sure. I mean, we found figurines, and we can suppose from there. I mean, we know they had the basic Germanic lore or cosmology structure, but beyond that, as also your Gothi said, things were so tribally specific. If we go to the North Sea, we have a god Saxno that does not show up anywhere else but in northern Germany and then eventually in England. Now, different scholars have tried to tie Saxonot to various different other deities, but that is a very tribal specific Germanic god. And I'm sure there were very specific tribal gods on the continent and in Scandinavia, wherever our people were, they had very specific tribal gods, but then they had the main ones as well, the main Aesir that we know and love. So a lot of it's guesswork. Like we said, there weren't written records back then.
They would have had local river goddesses. They would have had deities, like small level, like the river goddesses, as opposed to the great gods of our race. They'd have local cults to heroes and ancestors and things that we've probably never heard of, but that were, everything to that tribe. The other thing, and I think this is interesting, this is fascinating in general, but I really like this Icelandic manuscript, and I'm sure you've all seen pictures out of it. I didn't foresee this question, or I would have had one for example, but it has our lore in it, and our gods are wearing, Renaissance clothes, and their swords are much more like, cutlasses, and they've got pantaloons and, things from the time period from which it was written. And I think that, when you read our lore, if you read the Nibelungenlied and the Volsung saga, it's working from the same source material, but in one, the characters are very much described in a scaled down Icelandic farmers saga way, whereas in the other it's high medieval and they've got full suits of armor and armies in the tens of thousands and castles and things of that nature. And I think it's the nature of our folk. It's very unique in the time that we're in because we tend to envision our gods from the Viking period, and we all do. I'm not looking down my nose at that. We all do. But our ancestors, when that was there we go, Nick. I knew you'd come through. When it was a continuous tradition, the way that our ancestors conceived of their gods was in ways that was relevant to them. And we see some of that through the periods that we do have. And so we can only assume that in the Germanic tribal period, their gods would be wearing the clothes that they would wear. They would be, wearing the things that were culturally significant to them, fighting with the weapons that were significant to them. We know that, as Thor developed, his hammer looked really different. At, a very early period, it was just a club. I think that the imagery would have been different. One of the things that we do see in older sources is like the idea of the Valkyrie. We developed this like Wagnerian view of the Valkyrie as this, maiden in shining armor with, swan's wings on like Pegasuses that goes and swoops in the battlefield. And it's this beautiful thing. The further you go back, the imagery is much more, like carrion, scavenger creatures. It's much more, modeled after riding on the back of a wolf with raven wings as the things that pick bodies clean on the battlefield. I think you get to a much grimmer time, and I think the imagery of our gods was probably much grimmer then. But it's hard to tell. We weren't in the minds of those folk, but it's really interesting to put ourselves there as best we can and imagine what that would have been like. And like Rob says, there's fragments of archaeology. There's, we know a little bit about this right around this period from Tacitus's writings, but again, they're filtered through his lens. They're the Roman and, before that, Greek ethnographers describing what these foreign people did in terms that made sense to their audience. So it gets filtered through their lenses. But again, the stuff is so scattered and fragmented in the things that make it into Tacitus. But we see the processional nature of Nerthus. We see that later in Scandinavian stories about Frey in, processing through the land in a wagon. You see that Nerthus at the time was processed by a team of oxen through the land. It talks a little bit about the Nerthus cult and the slaves that prepared the Nerthus statue. You're not allowed to look upon the statue. The only people who saw the statue were these slaves that tended to it, and afterwards they were ceremonially sacrificed or ceremonially executed. So living people couldn't gaze upon Nerthus at the time. This is when you have discussions of bog sacrifice, and you see that with the Germanic tribal period. You see that less in country that's less boggy. But it's few and far between. One of the things, as far as sacrifices being made in the woods, you have attested to like skulls of Roman officers nailed to trees. So you have the sacrifices left in the trees. That's one of the things we see here that's, I don't know, kind of unique or an interesting reflection that we have attested to, because when the Roman armies came back through to collect, what they could when they went through the battlefield, I forget how many years later, but there was still, evidence of these. There was still bleached bones and the folks that have been left behind to sacrifice in the battlefield. But yeah, it's fascinating. There's so much lost to history that I'd love to go back and just have some kind of insight into that. Um, Allie asks, what was the impetus for the academy, and will we one day see a prom at Sigerheim? So, last question first. Yeah, or something like it. I would love to have dances at Sigerheim. We want to have this big hall there. I'd love to have that kind of stuff there. One of the things that we've always talked about since the beginning is we can get enough of our folks to move to Sigerheim or to Greater Sigerheim, which I'm calling the county surrounding Sigerheim. Then yeah, we would absolutely love to have dances there and love to get together and set up increasingly a school facility there for the children in that area that are commutable to it, to be able to come there and get educated together, even if they do span, many different ages. But we'd love to have that. We'd love to have a dance there. And I think that's something that, we could certainly see within our lifetimes. As far as the impetus for the academy, Rob can talk to the specifics of how it got developed, but as for me, it's one of the things that our folk have wanted for a really long time. And until, I want to say this last year, but this last year was when we actually enacted it, probably till the year previous. So about 2 years ago was when we finally had the right people in the right places to be able to make something happen. I think we all knew it was something that we wanted and that our folk wanted. And part of the impetus is the truly disgusting things that have happened in society as a whole that unfortunately largely target our children. And knowing that we wanted to provide a resource for our folk to get their kids out of that system and into a place that's much more healthy. When I was going to school, and my mom was an educator. She was a first grade teacher for better part of 30 years. I remember growing up, the idea of homeschool or religious schooling was really, kind of neat. And there was a lot of talk about it, but there's all these pros and cons. I'm like, well, but they need the socialization at regular public school. And yeah, but public school can provide this or that. That was, shoot, in the mid and late 90s. Since then, that balance has gotten drastically skewed. The pros of public school have, in many, many cases, gone to zero or very close there too. And the cons have just skyrocketed. So, I've said this before, but life has a way of red pilling folks. And I think that life has, the way things have been going, has made the necessity for this even more dire every year that goes by. So it's something that we had to do for our folk. But Rob can talk to you a little bit more about the impetus for going with a Waldorf method, with, structuring it how we have. What forces have driven you to structure it the way you have, Rob?
Well, honestly, when I was starting to put it together, I looked at some of the traditional instructional methods, and by chance, Rachel Johnson and her family with Mason and their kids came out to Ostara at Thorshoff, and someone said, "Oh, Rachel homeschools all her kids, and she knows a lot about it. You should talk to her." And I said, "Okay." So I had a conversation with her, and she told me about Waldorf, and she's very passionate about it, and told me all the great things about it. And I said, "Well, that does sound good. I'm going to research it." And I did. I looked into it. All the pros and cons. There are actually brick and mortar schools all over the country that use Waldorf as their basis, their Waldorf school. So I looked into it and I said and read on all the pros on it, that it's developmentally based, that it incorporates a lot of outside time and physical activity as well as academics. And that sounds really good. That's something that appeals to most people, and I like it quite a bit. So Rachel volunteered as staff for the academy, and I said we started initially doing kind of a both Waldorf and like quote unquote traditional instructional style, and everyone really, we had a lot of good feedback on the Waldorf, and we said let's just stick with what people like, what works, and that also allows us to purchase academic materials. And there are some things that we kind of have to tweak and change a little bit to fit Asatru, because it is a traditional, based program. So there's a part where you're going to learn about saints. Well, we're not going to learn about saints at Asatru Academy, so we plug in our heroes instead. So that's how we decided to go with Waldorf. And then, like I said, we do write religious material to go into lessons, and so you can teach Asatru as well as academics. And then we decided, we went with just a story time, and then we did a couple of story times where we had Timmy Dumas was reading, and his wife Christine was reading books. Children's stories that are traditional European and cultural, and that was wildly popular. So that kind of drove us. Well, we've got to get more of that for next year, and in the subsequent years. So that's what made us decide to go with more of that. And then we just listened to parents' feedback on what they liked and what they didn't like, and that's how we formulated the programs going forward.
So I think this one's interesting. Dean Stamm, what state or jurisdiction has proved the most challenging to accommodate in terms of regulations, reportings, and that kind of thing?
We've got a couple of difficult states, and there's some that you wouldn't think would be. Washington State is fairly bureaucratic. Um, Believe it or not, Tennessee is one of the more difficult states with their requirements, but we successfully navigate it. Florida is another one that's got a few hurdles that we have had to cross, but it's nothing that's insurmountable. It's absolutely doable. We absolutely make sure that it gets done, and that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
It's one of the things I love so much about it is that as our student base grows, we learn these things and we pave a way to where it's going to be so much easier for the students that come in behind them. I think it's really nice to watch how this is evolving. So Nick has a question. He read recently a post where someone said Njord and Skadi can and should be treated as trannies. Said that was a perfectly acceptable way to approach Asatru. The tiny bit of reasoning they gave was saying that Njordur was a masculinized version of the name Nerthus, and that Skadi was a feminized version of some other male word. Obviously, it's disgusting and an incredibly far stretch, but just how wrong is it? As wrong as you could possibly imagine, times 10 or thereabouts. This is, unfortunately, this is where scholastic approaches to religion lead. There is no it's hard to say not knowing the person that said this, but anyone who would conceive this and their reasoning would be based on the linguistics of names, they're not seeing our gods as living entities. They're seeing them as linguistic concepts, and that's not religion. That's not what religion is. If these gods were real to this person and he was engaged in worship of them, I think that the whole concept would be ludicrous. The fact that they are not real to this person means that he can, come up with exotic theories that sound politically hot button relevant today based on obscure linguistics and think that's okay, because there's not a lot of skin in the game. There's not a lot of idea of consequence. Like, I feel blasphemous reading the question out loud. I don't think that whoever posited this has any genuine faith in our gods, or they would be ashamed of saying something like that. As for the naming concept, I've never heard the Scotty one. I've heard the Northern one before, but I think that when you come with names, it becomes really tricky. We've seen in our own time names transcend gender a lot, which can be confusing. I can only imagine going that far back, because things share a common root shows a connection, but it doesn't necessarily mean two things are the same. And I think that it's a theory for me to declare one of our gods to be something that's so abhorrent to any traditional human being to think, based on, a theory, is, again, if you genuinely are pious and have belief in the gods, you would need something a lot more definitive than that for you to say that out loud or to genuinely have that affect your worship. There's no indication from any cultic practices associated with these deities that there's any whiff of that. There's some scholar who, 1,000 years later, looked back at two names that are different variations, that are different gender variations of a root word. That's not nearly enough to disavow every other bit of information we have about these characters. And secondly, trannies, they're produced offspring. And I don't think, again, we're in high mythology, but once you deviate from biological common sense that far, the production of offspring isn't really forthcoming. Do you have anything to add to the discussion, Rob?
I think you put it really well, but it just seems like folks that start from a position of, I need to justify my weird, I'm not going to say it, I almost did. I need to justify my mental illness by finding it somewhere in religiosity or history or whatever. They're starting off their pursuit with an agenda, with an end goal in sight, and they're going to skew anything they find to fit that point that they're trying to make. And if you have to search for something so hard to justify your deviation from normal, then it's probably not the right thing to do. It's not okay. And that's sad that it unfortunately makes its way into our faith. And they're trying to use our faith to justify their mental illness, but I guess it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, that is disgusting, offensive, and more than that, it's completely unfounded and wrong. Yeah, not sure who said that, but they should be cast out of association with good people that are people of dignity and perhaps checked into a mental health facility. The next question, do you look at what your kids watch on TV? Because I heard that there are now cartoons for kids that promote anti-white ideas. They absolutely are. I try to, you know, pay attention to what's on TV, not just what Aubrey's watching, but what, I'm watching around her as, stuff for her to pick up on. And we found cartoons that have, you know, gay characters or, you know, it's strange when it's animals. When it's animals, it tends to be a little bit safer, but sometimes at random you have an owl and a pig that have a child that's a rabbit. It's not how that works. So, I mean, I try to stay to where the rabbit family has rabbit kids and, the two goats have goat kids and, that with the stuff. There are definitely some, and unfortunately some that we used to like that have recently adopted degenerate agendas, and we've had to stop watching. So yeah, they do try to slip that in a lot of places. Surprisingly, there's a lot of places, specifically like Australian government funded TV shows that don't have a lot of that surprisingly have very traditional agendas and really nice things for kids. And that was a surprising thing to me. Also, I've found there's a number of like Chinese things that are very traditional and not infected with wokeness that, are dubbed in English that are cartoons with like little pandas and stuff. Trying to think of the name of the show right now, but yes, that's something we've had to be very aware of with Aubrey. What have you found in your experience, Rob? You've got a different age range of kids.
Yeah, definitely. My youngest is about the same, almost exactly the same age as Aubrey, and like you said, you really got to watch it because they'll sneak it in. Mine was watching a show on YouTube, and it's like crayons dancing, and so you could learn the colors. Going on little adventures in nature, and I wasn't paying attention, and I come back, and there's a new show on, and it's like robots and cars preparing for Pride Day. And I'm like, what? How did this happen? So yeah, you do have to watch. They'll sneak it in, and you might find something that's good on YouTube, and then it immediately goes to another video that's not even related, and it'll be bad. So you really have to watch.
So, at the risk of biting the hand that's feeding us, we're broadcasting on YouTube right now. But a YouTube thing that I noticed, with their commercials, and I don't know why it's targeted this way, but early on, we'd be watching kids stuff for Aubrey, and then they would have these commercials. Well, whatever. But instead of it being a regular sized commercial, it'd be like a 30-minute rap video commercial that's not even about like kids oriented stuff. It's completely not targeted to the audience. And it's, adult rap booty shaking videos for, 30 minutes in the middle of her cartoon about colors and how to use the potty. So, you gotta be vigilant on those things. And I mean, stuff, we all do the best we can. But some is, just because you can't be perfect doesn't mean that the effort you put in on trying doesn't count, because it does. Every little bit helps. So if you guys have any more questions, please get them out there. If you don't, this is the last question I see for this evening. Are there any other programs you would like to see develop within the AFA? Rob.
That's a good one. I think we've got a lot of great projects that are in the works. One thing that I did, and I think some of the Hoffs are already doing this, and I'd like to see it done at a national event level too. And they have been done at national event levels, and it's kind of within the stream of the academy is having a children's bloat or children's ritual, and really focusing on, because a lot of times the kids, we think they're having fun with other Asatru kids, they're running around, but are they really participating in the religiosity of the event? Well, we want them to, but we want them to do that on their level. So I'd really like to see that develop more. And I've spoken with, like I said, Whitney Young to implement some of that. So
It's such a broad question. I mean, yes, there's infinite programs I'd love to see develop within the AFA, but there's a couple of things that go into it that I don't think people necessarily realize, and I don't think I realized until I was in the big chair on it. You've got to have this sweet spot of having the right people with the right skill sets at the right time and the right interest from members to really make things be successful. There's a number of things that we wish we had or would love to have someday, but the dream you have in your head isn't necessarily how it develops based on the resources you have in your hands. And responding to the needs of our members and the needs of the times that we're in with the tools that are available to us. And when I mean that, I mean funding, yes, but specifically volunteers with the right skills and the right amount of time and amount of stick to itiveness. Because the one thing that I don't want to do, and I've tried really hard not to do, when the AFA puts our weight behind something that we're going to do, we want to succeed. We don't want to halfway do it. We don't want to start it and then not complete it. We don't want to advertise it and then not follow through. We don't want to do that. And it would be easy to do that on a lot of things. And so sometimes we're more reserved, or we'll plan something on the back end until it's much more certain before we announce it and make a big deal out of it. And I know this is, not a sexy way to answer the question, but it is something that goes in that I don't think a lot of people think of, like this homeschool thing. In a perfect world, I mean, this is something I wanted us to have day one when I became Ulterior Gothi in 2016. It's something that I wanted us to have probably at least 2 years before that when I was the folk builder coordinator. But we didn't have the people. We didn't have the right people at the right time. We didn't have the right resources in the right place at the right time. We do now. Same thing with, any of the things that we do. Very often they're things that we've wanted to do for a long time and just didn't have those right folks. We have to wait until the right people are there and things coalesce. One of the things that I really want more of is our history getting recorded. I want us to be able to produce and write more literary materials for folks. These are all things that I would love to see. But again, we haven't had the right people come along with the right skill set and the consistency of being able to devote their time to make some of those things happen. And I'm sure we'll see that in the future. But it's a very exciting journey, and we've got a lot of really great things ahead of us. And as those things come up, I'd love to meet those needs. One of the things people want to do, and this, has some overlap with, at least in the realm of talking about kids, we've always wanted to do, something akin to Asatru scouting. But again, we have issues with distance. Our kids live so far away from each other, especially ones that are same gender and the same age, that it's made that, something to dream about, but a really hard thing to put into practice. Well, the more people we get to move closer to one another, if we get more people to move to Sigerheim, if we get these things developing in the future, it makes those things much more realistic to make happen. So we're always looking for ways to make tighter knit and bigger, more functional Asatru communities. And we're doing a lot in that regard. But I think we'll see amazing things develop in their time. Just checking one last thing to make sure we don't miss something here. I believe that was our last question for the evening. Rob, thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you so much for all the amazing work with the Academy. And thank you for coming on and being our guest tonight and teaching people about Hermann.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I always enjoy being on.
Well, we look forward to having you all on again soon. Yep, hope all the rest of you guys have a good night. Hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA. And remember that victory never sleeps.